Number one, Gukesh has been struggling in this tournament. He lost his last round against David Paravian at the Qatar Masters. But today is a new day and he takes on the Dutch GM Robby Kevlishvili. Gukesh has the white pieces, comes well dressed in his jacket, opens the game with 1d4. What is Gukesh's opening going to be? Very interesting to see. Robby goes knight f6. And Gukesh brings his bishop out. We have the London system on the board. That's going to be exciting. Top players these days, whenever they want to fight for the full point, are going in for the London because it leads to some kind of new games, new setups. Maybe the opponents are not so well prepared yet. e6 played here by Robby. And now Gukesh pushes his pawn to e3. Black has many ways to play here. One is d5, other one is c5. He plays his pawn to c5. And will be interesting to see how Gukesh responds to this. c3 is one move here. And also you can bring your knight out to f3. That's what Gukesh does. He brings his knight to f3. London system fans can learn a lot from this way in which Gukesh is playing here. Bishop e7 played by Robby, and one of the main lines here is to go b6, bb7, castles and so on. Anatoly Karpov used to play that way, but h4 now played by Gukesh, the modern treatment of the opening. You don't really care where your king is going to go, you just push your h pawn. Robby goes b6, and this is also an interesting way to continue. But when b6 is played, white can now take advantage of it. You can see Gukesh now plays his knight to c3. This is an excellent move because bishop b7, already knight b5 can become very tricky to handle. So this move b6 is a little bit dangerous. Now Robby takes c takes d4, and here e takes d4 is possible, but white here can also take with the knight. And Gukesh takes, knight takes on d4 has been played. Fantastic. Castles played. The main point of knight takes d4 is that now the knight can jump here. Instead, if you had played a6, then queen f3 would have hit the rook, and you can't even move the rook because the knight is hanging. So anyway, castles, knight b5, the knight jumps back, and Gukesh goes queen f3 attacking the rook. You can see that it's move number 9, but already the game has become so sharp. Robby plays his knight to c6, and Gukesh can now jump into d6 at the right moment, but first he needs one more support, and for that long castling seems like the solution here. Gukesh taking his time, and he plays long castle, aggressively playing this game. Also, he has a pawn on h4. Soon his other pawn can join in and launch a huge attack. Bishop b7 played by Robby. One would think that Robby would be imagining that he has made no real mistakes out of the opening, so he shouldn't be really worse here. But you can also argue that the move b6 was inaccurate. Now Gukesh wants to push his pawn to h6 and sort of soften up black's king side. a6 has been played, and he goes in with his knight. Knight comes to d6, and after takes on d6, you can take back with the bishop. Yes, he takes, bishop takes on d6, and after bishop takes d6, there will be rook takes d6, which will happen. But he plays f5. Whoa, interesting move. White has no real control in the center with his pawns, but what he has is somehow his pieces are coordinating beautifully. The rook is well placed, the queen is in the game, looking here, pawn coming forward, b5 played by Robby. And now how does Gukesh continue here the game? This is very instructive. He first takes on e7. Notice, okay, how Gukesh manages to create counterplay, because this is something for all of us to learn. Queen takes e7, and now you might think, oh, he might develop his bishop here, looks good. But first queen c7 attacks the bishop, and he's like, okay, if you play d5, I'll trade, and this might be a slightly better endgame for me. So playing d5 doesn't really, is not very attractive. So bishop c8 makes sense, because you can always kick the queen away with rook a7. But now comes Gukesh's nice little move, g4. And that's how you create play. You are hacking this structure, and then your bishop can go on and put even more pressure. b4 played by Kevlishvili. The knight has to move. Where will the knight go is the question. Gukesh decides to go to a4. Later the knight can jump to c5 or b6, and that's why the knight is well placed there. And now he takes the pawn. He's won a pawn, and also if you see, he's attacking the f2 pawn. So Gukesh needs to play carefully. He comes back, queen g3, and defends the pawn, and also prepares to take this. So now the plans are clear. The bishop can go to d3 or c4. Rook can come to g1. He goes d5. So okay, bishop can't go here, but we can put our bishop on d3. But instead Gukesh goes on e2. He wants to take this pawn with his bishop, and with that he also wants to put pressure on e6. Rook b8 played. Now rook comes here. Careful, your rook could be hanging if the knight moves away. So Gukesh now brings the rook to g1. That's a new life for the rook. He's looking at the g7 pawn. Wow, this is very exciting. Bishop d7 played by Robby, and now white can play bishop takes g4. So takes, and notice now bishop takes e6 will already unleash some pressure here. However, the queen is defending, so you can actually deflect the queen with knight c5 ideas. King h8 is a decent move here by Robby, and I think Gukesh also goes king b1 so that his king is safe, and black can do well to play h6. The game is still evenly poised, but a big mistake here by Robby. Knight a7, and this knight was very important to control the e5 square. The moment it has moved, Gukesh now plays knight to c5. Fantastic move played by Gukesh. And the point is, the knight is attacking a6, d7 and e6, all these pawns. So what's happening? Robby says, I'm just taking the knight. But Gukesh now has another powerful strike in the position. Can you find it? White to play. Gukesh thinking hard here, but he's already figured it out, I'm sure. He knows what his next move is gonna be. He takes on e6, and he's threatening a mate here. And there's no real way you go queen e7. That's the most logical move, because now the queen defends the bishop, also the pawn. And this next move is an absolute joy to watch. h6, because if you take on e6, I take the pawn with a check and I win your rook. And your rook can't even go here because this is hanging. So he goes g6. In fact, g6 was the best defense here, but g6 is played, and that is the last and final blunder. Gukesh goes queen e5 check, and I think Robby has missed something. If rook f6, then the b8 rook is hanging, and he goes queen f6, hoping that after queen takes, rook takes, bishop d7, but Gukesh goes rook g8 check, and there you can see Robby had missed this move, a deflection. Rook takes rook is forced, you lose the queen, and it's game over. In just 28 moves, Gukesh has managed to create quite a nice miniature and a fantastic attack in the London system. That's what this youngster does when he's in full flow. He can really play aggressive, creative, and beautiful.